If you're a player that's working on shallowing the golf club in the downswing, we're going to talk about a concept called hand depth and why that is so important. So essentially what hand depth is how far we are getting the hands behind you at the top of the backswing. So if you're a player that really lifts these arms out in front of you or doesn't rotate the body a whole lot, which we'll get to, and my hands end up out over my toes or the end of this club is out over my toes, that's not going to be a whole lot of depth. But if you're a player, someone like Rory McIlroy, where as he turns, he is going to get those hands a little bit more back behind the heels, this is going to be a more significant amount of depth. And essentially what we are trying to do is get the weight of the club a little bit further back behind you. A lot of times what I'll see in players that, again, either don't turn or kind of lift these arms out in front of them is a little bit more of a choppy motion where that path is a little bit more out to in, or a little bit more of a kind of cut or slice bias pattern where players won't rotate, they'll lift the arms up and out. And as they work down, they chop across it, and usually you're going to get a more negative club path. Negative meaning out to in, or again, a little bit more kind of slice prone. So what we want to do is try to get the hands a little bit more behind the body. As we get the hands more behind, that gets the weight of the club more behind. From here, that club naturally is going to start to shallow and fall. So if I, instead of kind of getting lifty and keeping my hands out in front of me, if I rotate a little more, and we'll talk about how to do this, but if I get the weight of the club more behind me, it should shallow a little bit more naturally. And that should produce a little bit more of a positive or into out club path. So you can see that club path now went to 4.7 into out, and you can see definitely more of a draw or hook bias pattern there. So if you're a player that really struggles with slicing the ball, that is the first thing I would check personally, because I think hand depth is the easiest way to shallow the club without having to manipulate it. I'll see a lot of players that will get the club up to the top and they'll really try to get this club to lay behind them or add forearm rotation or do something with the wrist, where at the end of the day, if we would just get the hands a little more behind us, we wouldn't have to worry about any of that. The weight of the club is further behind. It's now going to shallow a little bit more naturally. So the biggest mistake that I will see from players is they will think, okay, I need to get my hands behind me. So what they'll do is they'll get set up, and their first move is to just rip this club too far from the inside. We don't really want the arms being the main moving force here. I don't want you getting here just feeling your lead arm rip across your chest and rip this club way too far to the inside, because from here, players will either get so far inside so fast that the only place they can go is back over the top, or they will rip it inside, try to keep it there, get very stuck, and now that path is massively into out. We want that depth to be gained gradually as this club sort of works up, back, and in, not so much just rip to the inside right off the start. So the main moving piece or moving force here is going to be body rotation. And I made a video recently talking about how to get the hips and the shoulders a little bit more involved. And going back to that video, and I'll make sure to include kind of a picture of it so you know what video to look for, is if we get the hips to rotate a little bit more efficiently, that allows the shoulders to turn a little bit more. As the hips turn more, shoulders turn more, that's going to allow hands to get further back behind us. So a good way that I will demonstrate this for players to kind of get this concept to click is if I get a ball between the forearms, what I don't want to see is kind of imagining I'm kind of working my way back. I don't want to get here and just rip my arms across where I start to lose my arm structure. I want to keep my arm structure pretty quiet, but work on body rotation to get this club to the top. So when I'm going up to the top, it's not so much getting here and just pulling the hands across. It's a little bit more of getting the body to rotate, trying to keep that arm structure in place. So body rotation is going to be the biggest driving force here. So if you are someone that comes over the top and slices the golf ball, adding more rotation to improve the depth is by far the first thing I would start with. So say you're somebody that improves the rotation, but you still have quite a bit of lift. You notice that as you turn, you do start to kind of push these arms out away from you, even though you feel like you're turning more, the hands are still out in front. It is not wrong to feel that lead arm work across the chest a little bit more. You just don't want that to be the only thing that's doing it, but it is not wrong by any means to feel that arm work across. So what you can do if that is the case is I would take a glove, put it underneath your armpit, and go ahead and get set up. If you notice that you improve your rotation, but you still have a tendency to kind of lift these arms up and out, you're obviously going to separate, glove is going to drop. So your goal is not so much to apply a ton of pressure across the chest, but just enough to the point where you can get set up here and feel that glove stay a little bit more and kind of connected into the armpit there. As that arm stays more connected on top of the rotation, hands are further behind. Now that club can shallow a little bit better versus lifting and picking up out in front of me and then chopping back down and across that thing. So say you're a player and you don't have the ability to rotate anymore. Say it's say you've had a past injury or it's a mobility thing, whatever it may be. This is where you have, and this is a topic for another day that I'll make a video on, but you need to do something to get the club to lay behind you. So if you're watching this and you realize that when you make a backswing, you rotate and this is about as far as you can get, you know you don't want to rip the arms across, but you also can't rotate anymore. We've got to do something to get the club to lay behind you, and that's where we have to start getting a little more creative, whether it's adding forearm rotation, and that is going to get the club to kind of fall behind, get the weight of the club to fall behind. You look at a player like John Rahm, very short golf swing, but that club is a little more laid off, just to help that weight of the club fall behind a little bit more. You don't see very many high-level players, if any, that have a very short vertical golf swing. Usually when swings are on the shorter side, they get a little bit more laid off to try to get this club, the weight of the club, more behind. So if you are someone that can't rotate to add that hand depth, that's where you do have to get a little bit more creative. But if you have more rotation in the tank, that is by far the first thing I would start with if you're trying to get that club to shallow a little bit better.